About 3 seconds after takeoff, both engine fuel switches of Air India Flight 171 transitioned to cut off within a second, causing dual engine failure as per the preliminary report.
Mayday.
Meanwhile, a few kilometers away from the airport was the BJ Medical College hostel where some students were having food, roaming around, while others were standing in queue to take lunch. Things took a tragic turn in less than a minute. In 2014, 10 employees of Boeing said they would not fly on the 787 Dreamliner. In 2019, John Barnett, who worked for Boeing for 32 years, told the BBC that employees had been deliberately fitting substandard parts to the aircraft. In 2025, aviation experts have raised concerns over the preliminary report on the Air India Flight 171 crash.
It is extremely unlikely that any of the pilots would have done this.
You have put an ambiguous statement.
12th June 2025 was the first time that a Boeing 787 Dreamliner had crashed since its commercial debut in 2011. It was a typical hot summer afternoon in Delhi on 12th June 2025. Around 10 am, Air India Flight 171, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, stood on the runway at Delhi Airport preparing for the flight to Ahmedabad. Then around 12:20 pm, the plane was refueled at the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport in Ahmedabad. An official from the aviation department told the Indian Express that refueling took 42 minutes, which is sometimes normal for long-distance flights. Now, while Air India Flight 171 was preparing for a long-haul flight to London, on board were 242 people, 230 passengers, 10 crew members and 2 pilots. Among the passengers, 169 were Indian nationals, 53 British nationals, 1 Canadian and 7 Portuguese passengers. Some were clicking pictures with their families, updating WhatsApp status, while others were looking forward to seeing their loved ones in London. The flight was initially supposed to take off for London at 1:10 pm, but it was delayed. The flight was under the command of Captain Sumit Sabrawal with First Officer Clive Kunder as co-pilot. Sabrawal had over 15,000 hours of experience, while co-pilot Kunder had flying experience of more than 3,400 hours. Now at 1:34 pm, the flight got the takeoff permission from Ahmedabad's air traffic controller. An airport official told Times of India there were no requests for runway changes, thrust modifications or flap adjustments. Weather conditions were stable, visibility was clear, and though the temperatures were high, they remained within operational limits. So the plane then took off at 1:38 pm from the Ahmedabad airport. On the other hand, about 2 kilometers from Ahmedabad airport was the busy residential area of Meghnani Nagar, where the BJ Medical College hostel was located. At the time, the hostel's canteen was filled with students getting lunch. There were at least 35 people. Some were having food, roaming around, while others were standing in the queue to take lunch. Now, just seconds after the plane took off, things took a tragic turn in less than a minute. When the plane was about 625 feet off the ground and still climbing, the pilot radioed a mayday call to Air Traffic Control or ATC, signaling a life-threatening emergency. But the signal from the aircraft was lost in less than a minute after takeoff. The Directorate General of Civil Aviation said subsequent calls by the ATC to the aircraft went unanswered. So, around 30 seconds after takeoff at 1:39 pm, Air India Flight 171 crashed into the rooftop of the hostel building, killing at least 260 people, including the hostel students. The ATC officials said they heard strange engine noises, loud burst followed by silence.
डर गया था मैं तो।
The crash site instantly turned into a scene of panic, smoke and screams. Some people jumped from the hostel building in panic to save themselves as seen in this video. The only person who survived was a British national of Indian origin named Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, who had been seated near an emergency exit in seat 11A. He said, "The side of the plane I was in landed on the ground and I could see that there was space outside the aircraft. So when my door broke, I escaped through it. In the following days, the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder, commonly known as the black boxes, were recovered from the crash site. Now what is black box? So black box is basically a data recorder which is designed in a way that it survives a plane crash. It contains all information related to the flight such as speed, altitude and engine performance, as well as the sounds and conversations taking place in the cockpit. So the black box becomes a crucial piece of evidence in figuring out what happened. So the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, or AAIB, submitted the preliminary report on the plane crash to the Ministry of Civil Aviation after decoding the data from the black boxes. So let me tell you what happened on 12th June according to the AAIB report. The takeoff took place at 1:38 p.m. and 39 seconds. 3 seconds after the takeoff, that is around 1:38 p.m. and 42 seconds, both fuel switches of engine 1 and 2 of the aircraft were transitioned from run to cutoff one after another with a time gap of 1 second. This resulted in a dual engine shutdown. The cockpit voice recorder captured one pilot asking, "Why did you cut off the fuel?" And the other responded, "I did not do so." The video recorded by Aryan Ansari also showed that the RAT, which is used only when there's total power failure, was automatically deployed at around 1:38 p.m. and 47 seconds. According to the report, this occurred after both engines lost power and the RAT activated to supply minimal emergency power, just enough to operate basic flight controls and instruments. Both fuel control switches were reversed back from cutoff to run by 1:38 p.m. and 56 seconds, and the engines were in the process of powering back again. But the crash occurred before full thrust could be restored, which would have allowed the aircraft to climb and stay in the air. Now, the main reason behind the crash was said to be fuel cutoff switches that control the fuel supply to the engines. On the Boeing 787, the fuel cutoff switches are located between the two pilot seats, as you can see in this picture. Each fuel control switch has a safety lock, so you have to pull it up before moving it. Metal guards on the side stop it from being bumped by accident. It also has guard bracket to prevent unintended activation.
It is extremely unlikely that any of the pilots would have done this.
So the reason, whether it was a mechanical problem, human action, or the safety lock failed, was still being investigated at the time of publishing this report. The AAIB report flagged that in 2018, the US Federal Aviation Administration had issued an alert about this exact issue, that fuel switches in some Boeing jets could be too easy to disengage. The alert wasn't mandatory, just a recommendation for airlines to check and inspect. So the report stated that this known issue existed years before, but the airline didn't seem to act on the recommendation. Now in 2025, after the Air India Flight 171 crash, Directorate General of Civil Aviation ordered the checking of fuel switch locking systems in the Boeing 787 and 737 planes of all airlines operating in the country. Quick fact. Only two Indian airlines operated the Dreamliner, Air India and Indigo. Air India had around 30 Dreamliners, including the 787-8 and 787-9 variants, while Indigo had just begun flying the 787-9. 12th June 2025 was the first time that the Boeing 787 Dreamliner had crashed since its entry into service in 2011. The Times of India reported that whistleblowers had been raising concerns about the Boeing 787 Dreamliner for years. In 2014, a documentary by Al Jazeera on the Boeing 787 showed a whistleblower secretly recording conversations with colleagues in one of the plants. In the documentary, 10 out of 15 employees said they would not fly on the 787 Dreamliner, citing quality control issues and safety concerns. One of the Boeing workers also said that he was concerned that some of his colleagues were on drugs. Boeing criticized the documentary by calling it biased and said majority of its reporting was based on unnamed sources pursuing their own agendas and a disgruntled former employee engaged in a legal dispute with Boeing. Safety is and always has been our priority. In 2019, a technician from a Boeing factory said, "I've told my wife that I never plan to fly on any Dreamliner because of safety issues." That same year, one of the whistleblowers, John Barnett, who worked for Boeing for 32 years and retired in 2017, told the BBC that employees had deliberately fitting substandard parts to the aircraft to avoid delays in the production process. He had also alleged that the oxygen systems on the plane were faulty, implying that 1 in 4 breathing masks would fail to work in an emergency situation. In March 2024, he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, according to the police. His family sued Boeing, alleging that a hostile work environment drove him to death. In April 2024, another whistleblower, Sam Salapur, said that parts of the 787 Dreamliner's body were improperly fastened and could break after mid-flight among thousands of flights. In response to all these allegations, Boeing has consistently maintained that it does not compromise on product safety or quality. Coming back to the Ahmedabad plane crash, President of Airline Pilot Association Captain Sam Thomas raised concerns over the AAIB preliminary report, saying,
It carries nobody's signature. It says the fuel control switches transitioned from run to cutoff. What do you mean by transition? It fell on its own? Or did the pilot do it? Why don't you write that there? Because everything is very clear in the DFDR. If you touch it, and such an airplane, even if you touch it, you will know whose hand has touched where. So instead of putting that, you have put an ambiguous statement.
This is a preliminary report right now, and from the ministry we are analyzing the report, but I think it would be better if we can comment on it once the final report comes in.
According to the International Civil Aviation Organization, which sets global standards for aviation accident investigations, a preliminary report should be released within 30 days of the incident. A final report should be released as soon as possible, ideally within 12 months. Air India CEO Campbell Wilson, in a letter addressed to employees, urged everyone to avoid drawing premature conclusions and said that the investigation was far from over.
The investigations will take time, but we will be fully transparent.
The Boeing team said it stands ready to support the investigation led by India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau. According to travel data provider Official Aviation Guide, an average of 1 lakh commercial flights take off every day. And as per the International Air Transport Association, accidents are extremely rare. The association said in its 2024 annual safety report that in 40.6 million flights, 7 fatal accidents took place. As far as the victims' families are concerned, the Tata Group, which owns Air India, announced compensation of 1 crore rupees. It later announced an additional compensation of 25 lakh rupees each to the families to help meet immediate financial needs. According to a 2023 report by the International Air Transport Association, Boeing and Airbus were the two largest manufacturers of large commercial passenger aircraft worldwide, controlling about 99% of the market. Boeing was founded in 1916 in the United States, while Airbus, the European aerospace giant, was set up in 1970 as a joint project by several European countries. The dominance was due to enormous investment requirements, decades of engineering and regulatory expertise, and extensive global production and support networks.